present possibility. I'm excited to introduce our panelists. Brendon, initial contributor of Core DAO. Brendon. Yeah, Brendon, the initial contributor of Core DAO. Brian, VP of Business Development of Thesis. Jonathan, Global Head of Growth at Elastos. And Peter, the CMO of Velar. And this panel is moderated by Amanda, the founder and CEO of Serotonin. Yep. So the stage is yours.
Welcome, everyone. I think we're going to have a great panel. We're going to make it super exciting. We have an awesome crew. We're going to start with some intros and then dive into our questions. My name is Amanda Cassatt. I'm the founder and CEO of Serotonin. Let's go down the line.
Test. All right, cool. It's exciting. Got some friends here, so I think this will be a fun one. Thanks for listening in. So Brendon, one of the initial contributors at Core Chain. We're a Bitcoin-powered chain that involves Bitcoin holders who stake Bitcoin to help secure the chain, as well as miners, and we're fully EVM compatible.
Hi, I'm John Hargreaves, and I'm Head of Growth at Elastos and Board Director of BEL2.
Hey everyone, my name is Brian Mahoney. I'm the VP Business Development at Thesis. We are a Bitcoin venture studio. We've been building products and services around Bitcoin for the last 10 years, behind projects like TBTC, Keep Network, Fold, and many others.
Hey, I'm Peter Watson, CMO of Velar. We're a DeFi protocol based on Bitcoin. We've currently got a launch pad, a DEX, and we're launching a perp DEX real soon.
So I started working in the space in the Ethereum community, and Ethereum was created out of an attempt to build stuff on Bitcoin. And there were a few years in there where there wasn't this profusion of Bitcoin L2s and Bitcoin DeFi. There was really the rise of these programmable blockchains. But over the last year, we suddenly see all of these Bitcoin L2s and all of this Bitcoin DeFi. The conversation we're having today really wasn't happening in the same way with the same energy a year ago. So I guess I'm curious, I don't know who wants to take this and start, but what changed? Was it a change with the technology? Is it this market cycle with the institutional liquidity coming in? What changed in the world that made this start suddenly happening?
I can jump in. So I think one of the biggest things is I sort of use Ethereum as, history rhymes in a lot of senses, and there's this major sort of renaissance unlock that's happened for Bitcoin. And I think, honestly, there's been the CryptoKitties moment for Bitcoin, which is when, ordinals, BRC20s, Bitcoin NFTs, that's really been one of the most exciting things to happen to Bitcoin, and unlock sort of this boomerang effect back of talent and capital back to building on Bitcoin. And timing is everything in crypto. As we know, this space moves super fast. We're in the middle of a super cycle now. And off the back of that, there's been this sort of resurgence of builders into Bitcoin and a explosion of something like 50 plus Bitcoin L2s that have come into the space. So it's a pretty interesting time to be building in Bitcoin. And also you have some other macro moments like the Bitcoin ETF. It's starting to really get adopted by institutions, the adoption curve, asset managers, that sort of thing. So there's a number of sort of across the value chain of interesting developments that have been sort of this inflection point for the industry.
Okay, so there's ordinals, there's ETFs. What are the other causal factors for why we're here talking about this?
I think, so one of my interesting angles on this one is that I think as we've gone through kind of each cycle, we've added more and more users and more people within the Bitcoin ecosystem. Some of them went to other, ecosystems and built there. Some of the ones went and invested in different tokens and different ecosystems. And in the end, most of them got wrecked. And I think what's actually happening each time is people are actually realizing that every 4 years, more people get involved and they get wrecked. And Bitcoin's the only thing that survives. And then they go through another cycle and they get wrecked again. And Bitcoin's the only thing that survives. So I think people have actually learned from history, which is you can go away, you can go figure out what's working in other areas and maybe buy a bag of that too. But in the end, Bitcoin always wins. And I think what we're seeing now is all these different builders in different ecosystems have decided that they know Bitcoin will win. And Bitcoin is pretty much guaranteed to win over a longer time horizon. So now they're deciding to double down and build on the strongest network in the world. And that's why we're seeing some of the greatest builders build here now, because we've learned from past experiences and we're rolling to future ones.
Bitcoin dominance is why we're here. So that's interesting. Okay, do you guys think the same? Anything you would add to this? Why are we here?
Not much more to add, but I think everyone covered it pretty well. But there was a lot of discussion before, right? We call it the fork wars. There was a lot of discussion to get to the best outcome or try and change Bitcoin, to provide more capabilities. But this current model won out, and there's, I think, clear consensus of what Bitcoin is, and there's not a lot of people trying to make major changes to the base layer. But there's kind of growing demand for Bitcoin, growing demand for Bitcoin utility, so that obviously leads us now.
Among whom?
Pardon me?
Among whom?
Among Bitcoin holders, or among Bitcoin holders themselves, right? With ordinals, which was just kind of live. I mean, one thing I'd say is, would you have thought that Bitcoiners would have spent their hard-earned Bitcoin to buy JPEGs a couple of years ago? I would have said absolutely not, but we've seen it. So that's really interesting, and I think that is kind of shifting some mindset to do other things with your Bitcoin as well. Will everyone participate in a variety of dApps? I don't think so. It's also not like that on ETH either, but there's a subset that want to and don't want to do it through TradFi solutions, which is kind of where if you want to borrow against your Bitcoin, can't do that now. Even through a traditional TradFi option, you probably will in the future. People are going to want options that are not controlled by centralized entities.
Anything you want to add to that?
Well, I'd add quite a non-technical answer, which is sort of animal spirits, really. Partly from having done some consulting in Ethereum network, where you've got these thousands of L2s that were generated, and there's not a lot of liquidity on some chains for those L2s, right? And then you just look over there, and there's potential massive amount. Obviously, it's not unlocked, but the potential is, well, over a trillion, whatever it is today. But so I think that kind of swing in, gut instinct in the market has really changed things. Added to the point, actually, the last presenter said that Bitcoin is hard, and I think some of the harder things have been figured out. We've had quite a bit of interesting success actually with inscriptions, ordinals, inscriptions on ordinals, putting audio on there. We can only get about 40 seconds at the moment, which is not enough for a song, for example. But that's improving, so the hard work's been done. So I think it's just kind of swing, and it might swing back again, obviously.
Makes sense to me. There's a heck of a lot of liquidity in Bitcoin, and it makes sense that all kinds of L2s and DeFi protocols would spring up to try to give that liquidity places to go and things to do. But my question and concern is, if Bitcoin is primarily a store of value asset like gold, doesn't that mean a lot of Bitcoiners are putting their Bitcoin on their hardware wallet and locking it up in a bank vault and coming to it with the mentality, this isn't the kind of thing that you do anything with. You don't want to take risks with it. I guess I wonder, who are the users that you imagine for Bitcoin DeFi? Is it end retail users, the kinds of people participating in ordinals and inscriptions? Or are these institutions, custodians, ETF providers? Who are the people that are actually going to be doing this?
I think the great thing with Bitcoin, and the great thing since I've been involved, has been that we can predict what we think Bitcoin will be, and most of the time we end up being wrong. And I think the great thing is we've got the technology now. There's people now building smart contracts on layer 1. Obviously, we've got layer 2s as well. So there's going to be a whole different number of routes that individuals can go to utilize DeFi on Bitcoin. And some might just want to kind of park it on L1 and get some nice yield or whatever, or borrow against it. Some might want to trade perps on L2, and that's completely fine. So I don't think we should ever be sitting there and assuming who our audience is. I think we just build what we think is right for the community, and then naturally can pivot and decide which route is best to continue building. When I sit in anything to do with marketing, the assumer is always wrong. So I will never assume anything. We'll build what we think is right. We'll make sure that we hire from within the community, because naturally people within the community know what the community wants. But the moment we start seeing data points telling us to build elsewhere, we'll do so. But I don't think we can assume who's going to be the user. We just need to give options and see where the money flows.
Yeah, that's great. Just to add on that, so if you look at the sort of the addressable market and total asset class of Bitcoin itself, right? There's about just over $1 trillion worth of Bitcoin that hasn't moved outside of the Bitcoin network or into cold storage, or it's just been sitting in cold storage for over a year, 24 months. It's at all-time highs in liquidity, 14 million total Bitcoin, right? And the total asset class itself is 1.3 trillion. And if you look at the total asset size of gold, that's about 15 trillion. So the HODL use case is real. I think if you think of Bitcoin as digital gold, there's plenty of room to grow this asset, and lots of ways for sort of builders like ourselves in the space to take advantage of that. But ultimately, I think the major unlock is sort of a circular economy effect for Bitcoin, right? I think fundamentally people do want to earn and grow their wealth, right? That's a very human trait, kind of back to the animal spirits point you made earlier. And we've seen this as well with the BlockFis of the past, the FTXs of the past. So what's another thing, kind of back to the earlier question, is there's this inflection point of a post-FTX world. This is the first cycle that I've seen in the industry where, the centralized lending player or centralized custody kind of firm that's lending out or giving you that yield, these businesses are not being funded. This is the first time where the projects are being built on chain, and that's really this evolution. People are finally aware of sort of the constant adage we preach of not your keys, not your coin, right? But people still want wealth, or still want to grow their wealth, right? And Bitcoin. So I think it's a very unique opportunity here in the space, and it's it's an institutional desire. It's also a retail desire and everything in between. But it needs to be done in a way that's true to the original vision of Bitcoin. And I think we're on the precipice right now of this unlock in the space. And we're seeing the infrastructure, the pipes being built right now with this L2 category that's fast emerging. And I'm very excited for the future of financial products around Bitcoin.
Yeah, one of the things actually I mentioned earlier was we did some research actually in Bitcoin usage in markets around the world. And we were really surprised at how high it was. We focused on tech savvy, which is about 30 to 40% of a population who identifies tech savvy. And in markets, you were getting 60% of people regularly using Bitcoin in like Nigeria and Brazil. In a place like Korea, it was 40% of that group using Bitcoin, highest in Asia, I think. And then a little bit lower in the Western markets. But what it suggests to me and to some of the analysts we looked at is that the usage has passed a kind of niche where people really, are wanting that kind of pure degen kind of experience. And you're getting people, particularly Korea. Korea's a fascinating market. The things that are happening in Korea around BitThumb and some of those exchanges, the innovation, it's like, wow, these people, you don't pay any tax on crypto in Korea, by the way, so that might explain it. But, so I think it's just gone past what was previously a niche I wouldn't say it's mainstream, I'd say it's probably early adopter to the mainstream. But I think that's what we're seeing. But we'll see.
I don't have a whole lot to add. It's covered very well again, but initially on the white paper it's a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, right? So I think digital gold is a great narrative, and it's got perfect scarcity and all the dynamics that gold has, but I think it's trying to be something more and better than gold. And there are, so I think you asked about users, right? Who's going to use it? I think anyone who holds Bitcoin or who holds any asset wants to earn more. People want to earn more Bitcoin. There just hasn't been primitives or an ability to do so on the main chain. So, generally, I think if there are opportunities to earn more Bitcoin or earn yield or put your assets to work, folks want to do that somehow, and it's currently very difficult to do that on the main chain.
So maybe we'll start with you on this one, Brendon. You all talked about being on the precipice in some way of some kind of breakthrough in terms of what's possible to build on Bitcoin or escape velocity with some of what the exchanges are building, or a big change in user behavior. What are the actual kind of technology unlocks that we are on the edge of that people should watch out for and know that the thing is really happening once that thing is unlocked?
Sure. So these are technological unlocks with Bitcoin scaling itself. Yeah. So, I think the thing that I'm personally excited about is bringing some sort of sustainable yield to Bitcoin. Obviously, the main Bitcoin network doesn't have a native yield like ETH does. It's typically miner driven, right? So this risk-free rate for Bitcoin holders, I think, is really interesting. And using the security of this asset, which is over $1 trillion, and putting it to work in risk-free yield, such as non-custodial Bitcoin staking. And you're seeing a lot of folks using the security budget of Bitcoin, the asset itself, to secure other chains. For example, Core does this. And I think that's an exciting next step that can allow you to put your Bitcoin to work, and then eventually crawl, walk, run, and do more with your Bitcoin and actually execute that on some sort of scaling layer or other side chain. So I'm personally very excited about that.
Non-custodial staking, absolutely huge. Other breakthroughs that we should be watching out for to know that the tsunami is coming?
Well, one that I'm quite interested in is PoCat, which is a soft fork that's it was originally actually part of the Bitcoin code, removed in 2010 for security reasons, but as I say, it's just been soft forked. What it will do is it will allow you to put a lot more detail on script on Bitcoin. So that's completely against what I was arguing earlier, which is that you don't want a load of script on Bitcoin, slowing it down and making it expensive. So who knows what that technology is going to look like, because it could, it was a security issue before, that might be fixed. It may fix this kind of how do you really interact with the script on Bitcoin, which I think will massively change things if they solve that. But to be seen, but it's one we're watching closely.
Making it much easier to program with.
Much, much easier, yeah. So that affects our strategy quite a lot.
Super cool. Brian?
Yeah, well, I also am very excited about the yield kind of risk-free rate use case. I think, I'm going to comment on another sort of category that I think is pretty interesting, is like the sort of the Bitcoin bridge category, or scaling Bitcoin, and really what we're seeing right now and with all these L2s, which many of them are proof-of-stake chains, which effectively need an underlying Bitcoin, or turn Bitcoin into a proof-of-stake asset, right? Not directly in some sense, but that's sort of like conceptually how you can think about it, because they need to get Bitcoin over to their chain, right? And you can't get the underlying spot Bitcoin there without bridging it, right? So Bitcoin bridges have been around in the space, actually. If anyone's familiar with WBTC, that was sort of like the OG one. It's still around. It's still the top leader in this category. It's started by BitGo, and it's a centralized bridge, right? So it's a way for you to use your Bitcoin cross-chain, EVM land, Ethereum, and beyond, but you have to do it through sort of a black box in the sense of BitGo. So you don't know exactly where your funds are at all time. There's not the transparency there. There's a few others out there, like we have one called TBTC. That's sort of like a decentralized WBTC. There's a couple others over the years, like Ren. But I think one of the challenges of adoption, like in terms of what we've seen with these Bitcoin bridges, is they've only really cracked a couple % of the total addressable market of Bitcoin in and of itself. Meaning 98% of spot Bitcoin is still on the Bitcoin L1 chain. It hasn't been moved cross-chain. And there's a number of reasons for that. I personally, having scale or brought a couple of these different products to markets over the years, I think it's actually a consumer layer problem, like at the UI UX level. And that is where, personally I'm super excited about using the foundation and groundwork that's been laid over the last 6 years in this category of Bitcoin bridging and Bitcoin scalability, and turning these into use cases that my dad or someone who's not a Bitcoin native person but has some Bitcoin would use. And that, I think, we need to unlock this new capital to flow into the space. And Bitcoin ETFs are another sort of example of this. We're going through the RIA, Registered Investment Advisor Network, and adoption, because a lot of people keep their money at banks and they get exposure to Bitcoin that way. But that's a sort of a 1 degree removed, right? And there is a category of the market that wants to get underlying exposure to the spot asset, and you can do that through Bitcoin bridging and stuff. But it's very technical and complex. So I'm very excited about sort of this L2 category that's emerging, and really that's going to unlock this wave of consumer applications and retail focused applications to make it way easier to exchange and swap and grow your Bitcoin and use it to buy ordinals or maybe even shop with your Bitcoin online kind of thing. So yeah, that's what I'm looking out for here in the next 12, 24 months.
So better bridges and more high quality wrapped Bitcoin projects so it can be used on other chains with good UX. What would you like to add, Peter?
So I'm really interested in the L2 space, don't get me wrong. I think seeing where that kind of goes would be really interesting. My only kind of slight worry right now in that whole space is that there's like 100 L2s coming to market now, of which very few actually have Bitcoin finality right now. So many are playing the narrative, right? And I call myself a modern maxi, which basically means like, I believe Bitcoin is the most important thing, but as long as we get finality, I'm okay with anything else. So I'm kind of slightly concerned about these L2s like actually becoming Bitcoin final. That's my one concern. The other thing I'm actually really intrigued on is L1, smart contracts and L1. There's a few projects coming to market now that are doing that. Obviously, you've got the negative aspects of slow blocks, expensive blocks, etc. But the actual thesis behind it, if I don't want to use a bridge with my Bitcoin, I can put it on L1 and get some good yield. But I think your point was incredible, actually, and it's something that I really believe in, which is most things on Bitcoin and the crypto space in general are just very complicated for the end user, right? I said from day one when I kind of started doing this thing was like, my job is actually to make this so easy that like people's parents can understand it, right? And people's grandparents can do it. So like most of Bitcoin has a like translation issue. Like, how do I use this? Why am I doing this? How do I make it work? Why is there risk? Should there be risk? So most of our job as CMOs or growth managers or whatever should be like actually communicating like a real human. Yeah, and not saying technical terms and like understanding through UI and UX where this goes. So, L1, L2 is like one thing that is really, really important, but making sure people can actually use the product is like the most important thing out of everything.
Such a great point. Maybe we'll actually start with you on our last question. You mentioned, a lot of these L2s don't have Bitcoin finality, and you're also a CMO, you're a communicator. Suddenly, this year, for all the reasons we talked about at the beginning of this conversation, everyone and their uncle is building a Bitcoin L2 or some kind of Bitcoin DeFi project. And the result of that is whether you're an institution or whether you're a retail end user, not only can you not tell the difference between all of these projects that are suddenly shouting in the market, there isn't even an agreed upon set of criteria for evaluating them in the first place. So perhaps each of you could talk about, and this is a good time to talk about what you're building if relevant here, what makes a good DeFi on Bitcoin project? What makes a good Bitcoin L2? And what makes a bad one? What should people actually look out for as the evaluation criteria?
So the biggest risk we have right now at Velar is that we're a DApp, right? So our whole thesis is to build everything that's ever been built on Ethereum on Bitcoin, right? That's our thesis. So, we've currently got our DEX and we've got our launchpad, and the perp DEX is like ready to just be deployed at this point. So we're building the assets, right? The reality is our biggest risk is partnering with L2s that aren't really Bitcoin finality. And the problem is right now is many are saying they will be or they're going to be, but like as a CMO, my number one care is that community. I don't want people trading perps on something that won't one day become Bitcoin final at least. Because when you're trading it, like you think it's Bitcoin finality. If I've dropped the ball and I've got you doing something that isn't Bitcoin finality, then I've rugged the community, and I don't want to do that. So my whole plan right now in Playbook is finding partners that I really believe in L2s that can actually do this, and then working with our like tech team, CTO, CPO, of making sure this project is the real deal. Because like, as a modern maxi, my number one thing I need to be doing is making sure that our users are getting what they really want to be doing, and that is trading on Bitcoin, trading perps on Bitcoin, swaps on Bitcoin, yields on Bitcoin, whatever it may be. So that's my number one concern for the actual community, is who's playing the media game, who's playing the real game, and I don't want to party with the people playing the media game. I want to be with real builders. So that's kind of the biggest worry I have for the community right now. And that's kind of my job to make sure that we don't go down that route, you know, with our partners.
Who wants to take this next?
We'll skip it up. You know, go hop around.
The
we
criteria.
don't need to stay on the line.
What makes it good? What makes it bad?
I'm obviously core biased, so I'll just speak generally, right? A lot of good points there from Peter. Also, you're going to love the next talk because our friend there, Janice, is trying to kind of standardize and open the kimono a bit on, and he's evaluating a variety of L2s. So check it out. They actually did a report on core and a variety of other L2s with this mission. So I think it's going to be a great talk. He's up next. But things to think about, we obviously talked a lot about hype, so tokenomics and was it a fair launch or not? You know, so a lot of chains are raising a lot of money with quick unlock schedules. When's the team unlocking? Are they trying to just play the cycle and make money? Is there a really long-term plan here to scale Bitcoin? I think that's important. Secondly is how is the chain itself aligned with Bitcoin or working with Bitcoin in any way? So right now it's very difficult to build a traditional L2, right, and how we define it with ETH. There are a lot of issues with trust assumptions, and a lot of people are kind of using that as a marketing term. So how's the chain actually aligning with Bitcoin, and what, you know, how are they basically aligning with the layer one? And I think those are probably the key things I'd be looking at right now in terms of evaluating all these players out there. And then, sorry, what are the trust assumptions that come with that? So what are the actual trust assumptions in this chain, and you know, what's happening when you're bridging in and out? How does the peg actually work? Is there an exit on both sides? I think all of those things are very important to look into.
Makes sense. What do you guys want to add to this?
Well, I'm going to deflect a bit as one of these drunken L2s that are running around because, no, seriously, I actually think partly it's around the idea of that you were talking about abstraction. So who are the L2s partnering with so that they're trying to abstract both the account and the chain, so that basically someone just sees a Bitcoin wallet and just goes, that's cool, the experience. And the L2s that are partnering with the right people. I know we've had some great ideas with Particle Network in looking at that. So you know, it is a bit of a deflection, but I do think, because I don't want to put anyone down really, I do think that if they've got the right group of partners that's heading in that direction, I think that's a pretty good sign. And then I will say security, right? Security, because the worst thing that could happen is it's just that the whole thing is wrecked by kind of stupid security decisions that were made in other technology decisions. So yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah, for me, when I'm evaluating the landscape, it kind of boils down to three things. First is I'm usually looking, okay, if it's an L2 or an app or something like, and they're claiming to be using Bitcoin, are they actually using Bitcoin? Or, or said another way, where does the yield come from, right? That's, I think a lot of us learned a lesson of the last cycle with Celsius and FTX, et cetera, right? These are managing large books, but there was a lot of underlying credit risk there, pumping their own books with the yield, right? And ultimately, the house of cards collapsed. So when you're using an app or considering to using an ecosystem or chain, what is the actual asset there, and is it if it's claiming to be a Bitcoin L2, you better make sure the Bitcoin's actually over there, or said another way, Bitcoin finality. And then the second thing is always custody, right? Making sure that, okay, at least doing your diligence on the fact that, hey, these guys are truthful and they're not just, it's not an IOU on the screen, but there's actually a flow of funds that's traceable. And I think the market has woken up to that, but in terms of the importance, but there is still a ways to go in terms of deciphering, okay, what's actual marketing language versus underlying code and translating that. And that's I think, a key area to always look out for. And then the third is, on the community side, right? What are some of the references of this project or app? Are people using it, right? And that's always kind of a good thing to double check, making sure that it's actually an ethical project and they have the best interests in mind of their customers and users, right? So yeah, those are always the three things that I'm looking out for in this category when it comes to Bitcoin DeFi.
Final words from any of our panelists before we wrap. Things that you didn't get to say but absolutely feel you must.
I think we know where this goes, right? I think we know where this goes both for this cycle and where it goes for the future cycles. And I think you've got to be really honest with yourself and understand where it goes too. So my prediction essentially is there's 100 L2s right now, of which 5 will actually probably be pretty decent and hang around. Of which of those 5, probably 3 are the real deal. And you should be finding, if you're looking to invest in the space, you should be trying to find the teams that are real Bitcoiners, right? Not people that have just come over here for the one cycle to make bag and leave. I truly believe that it's very, very easy to see in this space who's real and who's not. And you can ask a few probing questions and understand who's just here for the USD and who's here for Bitcoin. So I think people should be doing their research and understanding what's actually going on in this space right now. It's a super bullish time for Bitcoin. Back in 2017, I could never have dreamt of having the conversations I'm having right now. I remember when BlockFi was a thing, right? We're like, oh, we get yield. Wait a second, where's this coming from? And now we're finding a way to actually do it properly, right? So, I'm super bullish on the space, but I think we have to go into this space with our eyes wide open, right? Unfortunately, in this space, you have to assume the worst, do some due diligence, and then hope for the best, right? So, our team is full Bitcoin maxis. We completely believe in this thing. Like I said, that partnerships with our L2s make a huge deal for us because I don't want to be rugging my community because I'm from the community, and that's kind of how I see it. So, super bullish on the space, but I think we've got a long road ahead, and I'm hoping we all go in the right direction. And I will say this, if this goes where we all think it goes, I see no reason of using another chain ever again, ever. Bitcoin's one, genuinely. And I'm just working towards that mindset and that frame, and we'll just kind of keep building from there.
I love that. Honestly, I couldn't agree more with everything you just said, so that's great. Maybe you can come over and help us out at Thesis too. No, I think for us, Thesis, I'll just do a quick plug on us. We've been building in the space for 10 years now. We have about 6 different Bitcoin-focused projects. So if you're a miner or someone who's looking to put your Bitcoin to work, would love to chat after. We have yield products, bridges, on-ramps, and we also have a Bitcoin L2. So yeah, would love to chat after this.
I'm surprised no one's really talked about runes, and I don't want to sort of jump on another bandwagon. But actually, we were involved in some of the tech support for the runes launch in the US. It really looks like there's some great functionality. And we're quite fond of inscriptions, but it seems like you can do a lot more with runes. We're not quite sure what. Not quite sure how it relates to L2 as well. But yeah, I think it looks promising without setting another bandwagon going.
Any last words?
Just excited. I think great to be on this panel because there's a lot of folks here that were building on Bitcoin. We've all been building on Bitcoin before it was cool. So for example, Core's been worked on for over 4 years. Team has been in Bitcoin a long time. So it's just exciting to see all the energy that's coming here right now. And kind of the final thoughts, I think it was already said, but there's this nice term where it's I think it was already mentioned, but I think the big thing is if you don't know where the yield's coming from, you are the yield. Right, so just be cautious about that and do as much diligence as possible, and just excited to see where the space goes, and we're really pumped to be a part of it.
Beautiful closing words. Let's get the yield, not be the yield. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you please move a bit forward so we can take a good photo. Thank you so much for the beautiful sharing. Before we close, we have a special announcement from Janusz, project lead of Bitcoin Layers.